What originally drew you to the study of Egyptology?
What drew me to Egyptology? My mom remembered that it might have been seeing the Cleopatra movie in the 60s. And there was something about, that blue African sky and the desert. I don't know.
Elizabeth Taylor?
Elizabeth Taylor, maybe. I also remember being in high school and reading a book on archaeology and the great discoveries in archaeology and missing my stop because I was so caught up in my book. So it's a passion that I had for a long time, but then in university I kind of discovered rock and roll and played bass in a rock and roll band, and that was much more interesting to me at the time. So it wasn't until late in my university career that I decided to do this, and so I've had kind of a circuitous route to discovering Egyptology. So it goes.
And what has kept you interested for all these decades?
Amazing thing about them being so human. That wonderful push me, pull me about, it's a long time ago and it's very far away, so they're totally different from us because of that. And yet they're not, because they're human beings. The kinds of questions that they asked, the kinds of things that they put down in writing, the kind of stuff that they put up on walls art-wise, it's so incredibly human and humane that part of it still to this day, just, I'm very passionate about that.
In terms of Canadians in Egyptology today, and in the past number of decades, who has made an impact in the field?
Well, I guess you could go back all the way to Charles Corelli, who started the Royal Ontario Museum. But, the Canadian giant in Egyptology has to be Professor Redford, who was here at the University of Toronto for so long, who's, of course, very famous for his work on King Akhenaten, the East Karnak temple of Akhenaten there, and, of course, his work all over Egypt. So Redford has to be the giant. But, of course, one of my other professors here was Professor Ronald J. Williams, who was a brilliant, not only Egyptologist, but also a Syriologist and Hebraist, and a magnificent human being. So when you think also of Tony Mills, Anthony J. Mills, the head of the Dakhla Oasis Project, who's been working in the Western Desert for, 35 years. So yeah, he's had a big impact on Egyptology just because of his very important work in the Western Desert.
What are the most important projects you think are going on right now?
I think the work at the mortuary temple of Amenhotep III on the West Bank. I think Joe Wagner's work at Abydos, where he's found yet a new king, the so-called Abydos dynasty. They've just found a new tomb. So yeah, work is still going on there. It's not the kind of work that used to be done 50, 75, 100 years ago, where people were looking for museum pieces, but people are much more interested in how people lived, and so the kind of work that is being done is slower than it used to be, but that's because they're so much more thorough than they used to be. And so that part of it is just fascinating, again, because it's all looking at people and how they manage their lives.
You've had some great accomplishments as a professor, as an esteemed researcher. You worked at the Dakhla Oasis Project and the Akhenaten Temple Project with Redford. But in your career, what would you say are one or some of your proudest accomplishments?
My proudest accomplishments? Easy. My students. I've sent students to Chicago, Berkeley, Cambridge, Oxford, and if you look at my PhD students, just about every one of them has a really good job in a university today, whether as Egyptologists or sort of general ancient historians. And so we've trained them well, and it's like being a parent. I'm proud of them. Bless them.
What are your next goals for your career in Egyptology?
I'm still enjoying working on their moral code of conduct, the sorts of things that they said about themselves, which tells us a lot about how they felt about the people around them, their position in society. That part of it still fascinates me. I'd like to put a book on the religious texts so that people don't have to keep going to 19,000 books in French, English, and German. A lot of it will be there between two covers. So that's kind of, those are the things that I'm working on right now.
That's awesome. And a final question. If you were a pharaoh in ancient Egypt, which pharaoh would you be?
Well, that's easy. I wrote my dissertation on Amenemhat III, late in the 12th dynasty. And so I'm not sure I want to be him, but I'd certainly want to be his scribe, let's say.
Ooh.
To hang around at the court, and I would tell everybody to bring all their records and put it in their tomb so that in a few thousand years Egyptologists can discover the papyri.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ronald Leprohon.